In Man vs. Bear Part 1, we went over the numbers and showed how a woman is 9,000 times more likely to be assaulted by a bear than by a man. But even though women know that bears are more dangerous, we should ask why they would choose a merciless creature over a random man. At first glance, the answer seems to be an easy one, that it's because while the worst thing a bear can do is kill you out of self preservation, the worst thing a man can do is torture you for his own pleasure. And that would be an appropriate response. But before you brush your hands off and give yourself a pat on the back, let's remember that a woman is just as capable of harming another person. Now, women might not be as physically violent as men are. Women are notorious for being emotionally, mentally, and financially abusive. No, it's not all women, but a lot of them are. So much so that the response to the bear versus man question has comedically evolved into asking men if they would rather be emotionally vulnerable in front of a woman or a tree. And we can all guess how most guys would answer. This is not to equate physical violence with emotional manipulation and abuse. This is to simply show that both sides harm each other in different ways. It's the 21st century and we've come a long way through history. But why do we still have these fundamental problems? Well, surprisingly, both men and women have laid stepping stones for themselves and each other towards this degraded state of society. There is a plethora of reasons why people are more inclined towards certain wrongful behaviors while others are not, such as dynamics of control, false stereotypes of sexes, childhood upbringing, social isolation, trauma exposure, substance abuse, sexual power, media misinformation, and legal motivation. There are a lot of problems to choose from. We are going to look into a few of them. Ignoring responsibility. Responsibility is the expected behavior a person is obligated to fulfill. One example is women and nightclubs. Many of the women who say they feel safer around wild human killing bears than they are with men are the same women who are more than excited to go to the club full of men, voluntarily become intoxicated around these men, and wake up in a drunken stupor next to a man or multiple men, not certain whether or not she was tossed around like a hot potato. According to Butler University, many cases of sexual assault occur when the victim is intoxicated. A study done by the American Addiction Centers found that about 43% of sexual assault events involve the victim to be intoxicated. That's almost half of all sexual assault cases. No, I'm not saying that it is the drunk woman's fault for getting used or abused, but you must admit that she is not completely innocent of the situation she finds herself in. If a man walks through a park trail and sees a venomous snake in the middle of the trail, the man has three options. A, he turns around and walks away from the snake. B, he takes a risk and cautiously walks around the snake. Or C, he walks right into the path of the snake, willingly endangering himself because of his you only live once attitude. If the man chose the third option and was bitten by the snake, would you put all the blame on the snake? Or would you recognize that the man had a part to play in his own injury? If you think that the man held some responsibility to his own safety, then you would be right. Surprisingly, we find the same picture play out for many women. Many women do not hold themselves or other women responsible for their foolish actions, which lead them into dangerous situations. Women cannot put all the responsibility of a woman's safety on men. Women, just like men, are responsible to keep themselves safe and secure. If they took their own safety and well being more seriously, many of them wouldn't find themselves in those terrible situations. Responsibility is founded upon a few elements, one of them being capability. If a person is not capable of doing the right thing, then they are not responsible for it. Other elements include assumed function and moral discernment. Besides the women's side, men also have a responsibility and duty to keep themselves in control of their actions, keeping whatever selfish and malicious desires, however evil, in check. Men need to get a handle on their sexual drive, pride, anger, hatred, and appetite for power. They should redirect their energy from causing a destructive output to being more productive and yield beneficial results. Instead of hitting a woman, the man should turn on a Bob Ross tutorial and paint those happy little clouds. Unfortunately, many boys haven't been raised to regulate their emotions properly, which, when left unchecked, could lead men to spiral out of control and end up committing serious damage in the lives of others. More on this later. Avoiding self reflection. Self reflection is when a person evaluates their own thoughts, actions, and motivations. A lot of women believe that nightclubs and bars are hunting grounds for suspicious and dangerous men, and yet, strangely enough, they still want to go there. Many women have revealed their own hypocrisy and double standards by avoiding accountability, blaming everything on men, and yet foolishly choose to continue associating with them all the more. These situations could be easily prevented if those women reflected on their actions. Though a great deal of those problems can be solved if the women chose to avoid those obviously risky situations in the first place, the majority of sexual assault cases are outside of women's control. After all, it is the men who are the more predatory of the sexes. Many men reflect on their desires prior to acting on them, but not enough men to come to a total number do. There are a lot of men who commit vile things without self reflection. According to data provided by the Federal Bureau of Investigation in 2019, of the total 115,180 sex offenders, 105,030, or 91% of sex offenders, were male. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, 83% of released prisoners were arrested within 9 years of being released. If you'd like to find out how many sex offenders live in your area, visit the Family Watchdog. Type in your city and watch the balloons populate. Here's a picture of New York City with almost 1,500 mapped offenders. Better yet, you can download the National Sex Offender Public Website app, and you will have access to a more accurate and up-to-date database. And while you're at it, search for opportunities to get some therapy. Pick up some books at the library to learn more about practical psychology, ethics, and self improvement. You and everyone around you will benefit from your self reflection. Sexual chaos. If you're not doing it right, then you're doing it wrong. Just as alcohol consumption have led women to making very poor choices in life and men not reflecting on their past patterns of behavior, so has the dark entertainment industry led young men down dark roads. How could we expect men and young boys who watch content of women being used and abused like throwaway rags to mature and develop into strong men who will show women true love? How could we expect men and young boys to treat women with the respect they deserve when most of what they watch subconsciously brainwashes them to enjoy the abuse and sexual objectification of women? Sex is a powerful instrument in the human psyche. Women have harmed society through the sexual revolution, distributing sexual acts to the public masses, thinking their actions would have no repercussions, or worse, knowing the terrible effect their actions would bring, but still chose to do so for selfish gain. There are more than 150,000 professional and amateur adult film actresses featured in the United States. A certain orange and black adult film website features more than 25 million videos of adult content. That figures into more than 5 million hours of content. That would take a person 570 years of watching adult content without sleep, without food, without breaks. Nothing but watching happy fappy time. If you started watching the videos uploaded on just the Orange Hub starting at the time Christopher Columbus landed in North America, you would still have 38 years worth of adult films to watch. There are a dozen other websites just like the Orange Hub. So don't even try to wrap your head around those numbers. America is the number one leader in production and consumption of the adult film industry in the world. If you think that's bad, here's something to really consider. Many studies have reported that the average age for viewing pornography for the first time is 12. And that's the average, which means that there are millions of 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and 9-year-olds who are discovering this visually traumatizing, abusive trash right now as we speak. In fact, 15% of teenagers have seen adult content before the age of 10. Furthermore, with the onset of OnlyFans, women now have more freedom and flexibility to start and lead their own work in adult filming. OnlyFans reported 1.4 million female content creators on their platform. This means 2% of women aged 18 to 45 are selling their bodies virtually. They are society's billboard giving a PSA on how it's okay to sexually objectify a woman if that is what she wants. In fact, it is empowering when the woman sexually objectifies herself. And yet, these women wonder why men sexually objectify them, without considering that men were trained by women to do so. Absolute insanity. Modern feminism teaches women to degrade themselves and then cast all the blame on men for being taught by women on how to degrade women. Unfortunately, this also feeds into the degradation of men and masculinity in civilization, seducing men into becoming slaves of their own sexual lust and financially supporting the women who have enslaved their minds. You can find a bunch of articles on the damaging and toxic effects of pornography in the description. Lack of reliability. Without trust, self destruction is the only solution. Reliability is another necessary facet of society. How could one cooperate in the world without being trustful? When men do not demonstrate their capacity to be reliable and strong leaders in the home, at work, and in public, their inaction forces women to depend mostly upon themselves, becoming less inclined to trust others, making them resentful towards men. A man's reliability is forged through guidance and productivity. If a man lacks wisdom and love, yet is productive in creating material prosperity, he is a man of means without morals. A man who is guided to be kind and compassionate, but is not hardworking and ambitious, is looked upon as useless and boring. This kind of man is docile and weak. Men must be both wise and industrious, loving and strong. But how is a boy to learn how to be a good, strong man without another man possessing these traits to direct him towards what is good and true? In the United States, 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Does that mean women are to blame for the high divorce rate? Not necessarily. There are many factors that go into why the divorce rate is high and why women are the prime initiators of divorce. Some of the most common reasons include lack of communication, unmet emotional needs, lack of companionship, verbal conflict, arguing, and lack of honest openness. When these needs are left unmet, it leads to growing dissatisfaction in marriage and eventual divorce in 64% of cases. A paper done in Coastal Carolina University detailed to great extent the differences between male and female communication. For many women, the expectations they hold when they get married fail to match up to reality. Many experts in the field say that women often have higher expectations of how a partner will meet their emotional needs than men, which leads women to be disappointed after the wedding. Professionals such as Gilza Ford Martinez, a Florida based licensed couples therapist specializing in conflict resolution, said that men are usually raised to have lower emotional intelligence than women, which leads to wives feeling unsupported and carrying much of the emotional burden in marriage. A woman is raised to be more emotionally intelligent, developing her sensitivity to problems and red flags in relationships. This means that the woman is more likely to be the first to raise issues, which increases the chances of separation or divorce. Now, here is an interesting question. If women are stereotypically better at relationships than men, then why do lesbian marriages have the highest rate of divorce at 34%, followed by heterosexual married couples at 19%, with gay marriages having the lowest rate of divorce of 16%, according to the Troto law firm? Now, that all seems to be allegorical generalizations that ignore many other factors besides emotional needs and lack of communication. This doesn't change the fact that both men and women need to learn how to express themselves appropriately, how to articulate their thoughts in a manner the other person will understand, and how to listen when their partner is speaking. These behaviors are required by both men and women. Lack of the masculine guidance from a male role model. Some women say that boys should be taught by women to properly learn to respect women. Funny enough, we are probably the most female raised generation in human history. In 2018, 76% of school teachers were female. About 24 million, or one third of all children in the US, lived with a single parent, of which 80% were single mothers. That means about 27%, that's more than a quarter, of all US children are raised 100% only by women. There has never been a society in history in which women held the most influence as they do today, and yet the number of boys who grow up without any idea of how to interact with women properly is rising ever faster. Men make up at least 90% of criminals who commit sexual assault and other violent crimes. To say that there is no difference of sex in criminal cases would be delusional. Men's absence and violence cause the most violent problems in society. According to Criminal Justice and Behavior, 80% of rapists displaced with anger come from fatherless homes. The U.S. Department of Health reported 71% of pregnant teenage girls lack a father. The CDC reported children in households with both biological parents perform 3 times better in school than in single mother households. Now, the data I shared with you can be skewed and abused. It is not to put blame on the women. The point to be made is not whether the boy was raised by a single mother, neither is it about whether there was a father in the picture, but whether a good, strong man was in the life of the boy to guide him on the right path. This does not mean that most men are at fault. Rather, most of those who are at fault are men. And unfortunately, many women aren't doing much to improve the situation. In fact, a great deal of women are making the problems much, much worse. Why are women so terrible and awful? Is not the right question to ask. The question to ask right now is, why aren't there more good men? And here is the answer. The environment to cultivate good men has been eroding for the past 50 years. All these problems are just a few of many examples of the failures both men and women caused. Both are at fault, and bickering at who's more guilty won't get us anywhere. It is high time we discover the way to fix this nationwide problem. Because if we don't, life will only get worse, not only for ourselves, but for the future generations. We will discuss solutions in Man vs. Bear Part 3.